Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It is great to be here. And I'm very excited to bring this interview to our listeners. We've got Hughes. She's a thriller writer and also a developmental editor. JL, welcome to Get to Know.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you guys.
I am really excited about your new book. But before we get to that, as Doug says, I want to put you on the psychiatric couch. I want to ask you if you think your childhood contributed to you becoming an author. Were you a shy child? Did you have imaginary friends?
Tell us about it. Kathy, you're great because that is the perfect question for me. Absolutely. So my background is kind of my parents' background, British and Scottish Welsh, and they're storytellers. So my mother established reading hour when I was like 3. And it wasn't you had to, it was, oh, we get to sit in the nicest room of the house. And, you know, we get to this avenue of escapism. And we shared it all silently, but it was really something I loved growing up. And then my dad was very much a humorous storyteller. So if he wanted us to learn a lesson, he would tell us some crazy story that him and his brothers did, some warning in the funniest fashion. So, and my mother was an avid reader. So I was the kid with the books lining her whole entire bedroom, all around the outside of it. Like as soon as I hit the door on both sides, I thought, yay, like I've made it in life. So I think that those components absolutely made me the author I am today. But I think it was also, I'm very compelled by everything I don't know. So anything that is out there and we're just learning about, if there's a documentary coming on about something we've never heard of before, I'm glued. I'm reading all of that. That's kind of the journalist background for me, but I think it also contributes to being a ghostwriter and a developmental and conceptual editor because I get to read things I've never seen before or that aren't out there yet. So I think, all of those components of childhood definitely contributed to being a writer. I was destined from both sides, I think.
Did you have imaginary friends?
No, I didn't. My brother did. And I respected his imaginary friend very much. But yeah.
What did that look like? Respecting his imaginary friend.
He introduced me. I still remember it from I have EDIC memory, so I have a really good memory. When I was very, very, very little, I think I was like 2.5, 3 years old, he introduced me to his imaginary friend. My brother's older than me. And so he always got a seat at the table and I was let know, no, he's sitting here. So you have to sit on this side. It didn't last for very many years, but it was pretty fun. And I felt so happy to be a part of that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So you were tell us about your journalism career. What would that entail, and how long did that go on?
Actually,
prior to noveling, becoming a novelist.
Yeah, it wasn't actually that long. I started really young. I was writing before I was out of university. So it just because I did kind of an interim thing for the paper, and I ended actually trumping them on murder suicide. So I ended up writing really early for them. And I kind of wanted to write everything. So I worked for legal firms to do case histories. I worked for the police department. I used to do ride-alongs with them, and I would categorize how that ride-along sting operation went down for them to analyze after. Anything that was writing, I wanted to try so that I had this body of work to pull from. So it wasn't too long before I started delving into what if I turned this into a book. But I think that all those components contribute to everything we write because it gave me access to such great stories. I did the sexually sadistic serial killer tour with Roy Hazelwood of the FBI when I was really young, and it had a profound effect on me. And I think that was why I kind of tend to lean towards crime all the time. But yeah, it wasn't that long before I started trying other things with writing.
When you made that decision that, hey, this would make a good story, make a good fictional story, and so you decided, okay, now's the time I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write this. What was that like, and what was that story?
Yeah, well, I think that it was a version of R.A.Y. I actually was at an Irish pub with my mother, and I looked across the table and went, you know what? This is a book. And life gets in the way. So sometimes you push that off, but I always kept all the ideas, written down so I could address them later when life allowed for it. But yeah, it was a moment where I went, okay, feature article is one thing, novella is one thing, but this is actually a thriller. This is a book. And at that point, I made it my job kind of to get into that field and learn everything I could from the best. So I've had some tremendous mentors, and I've put myself through the ringer with a lot of courses and different available conference things when I was younger, so that I could perfect the craft of transitioning from journalist to author, because it is a big jump. Both of them, I think, lend to one another, but there's a lot to learn. So I learned everything. I immersed myself in it, and that was kind of the start, I think, of author life.
So let's talk about R.A.Y. You mentioned it, and tell us about R.A.Y.
R.A.Y. Well, I love superheroes. I think I love villains more. And the concept behind R.A.Y. was really to take that. I think really when we look at that sort of thing, there's a thrill within the story that's heightened the closer we write to what can actually happen. So what if we took a supervillain that really was human, every part human? But I compiled that with a character that's dealing with something I think all of us in some way or form have or will or are dealing with, and that's isolation. R.A.Y. has the ultimate isolation. She is the only one of her kind and well aware of it. Everyone either fears her or doesn't know her at all. So there is this loneliness embedded in this villain that I think was interesting to play with for a character. And then I juxtapositioned that with, I think that, when you get yourself in the worst kind of trouble, you kind of hope that even though, it doesn't matter, what name you call it by, but if you can have some kind of higher power intervention, isn't that what we all want? Well, with the way that technology is advancing right now, we really don't know the consequences of how far we're reaching in so many different areas. And so I think that combining those three elements is really what R.A.Y. is all about.
Can you tell us a little bit about why and how she's so different?
Well, she's genetically engineered. So she's the ultimate human being. You take every part of DNA from several different donors, and you take the perfected part of each of that, and you create her. So she is a hybrid human, someone who doesn't get sick, who has perfect vision, who has strength that is uncanny in most people, who has an intellect that we can't even gauge because it's so far beyond where we've been. So it's really taking our DNA and purifying it to a place where it's the unknown now. And then you take her and you put her in the hands of a doctor and have her raised by someone who's a transplant expert, and you get, you get a lot of conflict.
Yes, you do. And I really admire all the research that I know you did for this, because the scientific and medical stuff in there is pretty cool, and it's pretty forward thinking, and it's pretty out, CRISPR and all that stuff is way out on the cutting edge of medical technology. How much time did you spend digging into all that stuff before you actually put pen to page, or did you start the story and say, oh, I need to know a whole lot more about this and this and this? How did
I think it kind of was a combination of both. I mean, I happen to have a friend who is a brain surgeon, and so I reached out for all of that information. But there was, like you said, I'm diving into the story, and then I would hit a part where it was like, okay, we need to really know what this looks like and how to get this right. So I would call on experts in that area or do lots of research in that area until I went, okay, and then I'd have it checked and go, yeah, now we're good. And luckily, it all worked out really well. But it was really interesting too. I mean, I learned a lot about Tac Macmillan rifles. There's a lot in the research, but having that interest in stuff I don't know, the research is fun for me. So I really enjoyed learning all the things that I did, as much as some of it is pretty scary, what we're doing medically right now.
Mm-hmm. Well,
No,
speaking of pretty scary, this is pretty scary, this cover, which I just love.
it's a great.
When you first saw it, did you like squeal? Like, oh my God.
Actually, you know, I really love and appreciate my editorial team. I mean, my publishing house is just absolutely the best. But the thing with the cover is that I did a template for it. And so I said, this is what I'm thinking, and actually gave them a photograph and said, can we work with this? And they took it into like the 21st century sort of thing. They perfected it. And when they came back with this, I was like, wow, you really nailed it. Like, this is exactly right. So
her eyes are haunting.
Yeah, it is. And her eyes are the whole story here. I mean,
they are.
That's the thing people notice and run from.
Well, and that's the whole thing with the genetic engineering that she has no eye color. So that's part of the character itself. And I just think they did such a great job of reflecting exactly what the storyline is in the cover.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your process when you're writing a book. Are you a pantser? Do you outline?
I don't.
How do you go about it?
I actually don't. I have this, I don't know, it's a quirky thing, but I feel like if I thought too much about a story or the character that steps forward for me, I would ruin the organic process. I would take away from their authenticity. So when a character kind of approaches, I get an idea and it steps forward, I kind of leave it alone. I deliberately don't think about it. And when it comes back, it's almost fully formed. So by the time I start writing, I think I know the whole story from beginning to end. But it's kind of like driving down a highway that you've been down one time. You know where you're going, but there's a lot of things you're gonna hit along the way that are surprises. And I think those surprises sometimes are the best aspects of the story. But for me, I don't outline, but I do that thing I think that all journalists or people that were trained in that respect do. While I'm writing, the next day I'll go back and I will edit what I wrote the day before. And I'll take a look at that and say, do I need to strengthen that? Is there a word choice I'm not happy with where it's just not nailing that mood or that intention of the character? Or is there something more here that this needs to say? So I readdress kind of as I go along, but I've never been an outliner. And weirdly enough, it seems to all come together. And I think that if I thought about it too much, I probably would lose the ability to do that.
I'm pretty much the same way. And somebody said once in a conference recently, actually, something about somebody asked the question. So, well, if you don't outline, how do you know that you're not, getting in trouble? How do you know you're not, messing up the story? And she said, it's like being a trapeze artist. Just jump and the net will appear.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I do it. I don't know where this is going yet, but I know it's going to work out.
Yeah, I think you, me, and Lee Child are kind of identical in that structure, the way that we write. Because I feel like for me, if I'm not surprised along the way, I don't think my readers are going to be. I feel like that organic kind of process is what adds the flavor and the richness of the story. And I really want to produce something that's worthy of the valuable time that they're giving to read. So I don't want to interfere with that process at all. So I try to step back from it as much as I can.
Plus, it's more fun that way.
Yeah, it is more fun that way.
I outline, but I really, my outlines end up being a first draft. So I'm not sure that it's that different.
Yeah.
It's just, I might not be fleshing out the scenes quite as much the first
Kathy's
time.
writing a great book. She started during Babylonian times.
I did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, not the subject. She actually started writing then.
I'm
We
very
give her
old
grief
as
all the
well.
time.
I'm very, very old as well.
I'm going to read that one. That sounds really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I will get it done. But
besides that, but you write other stuff, more mysteries and more thriller type stuff that's not as so far out on the periphery as R.A.Y is. What about those things?
Well, that's the funny thing is R.A.Y is kind of my one of left field, because my natural tendency is to do police procedural and crime. So my trilogy that's coming out in the summer of 2025 is all crime based, and it's a police procedural series. And that's where my normal is. So R.A.Y was a little bit of a different kind of avenue for me to take, but it was super fun. I really enjoyed the process of it. And I don't know if she's got more to offer or not. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, my go-to is always crime. That's the field that I was in. That's where my interest all held as a journalist. And that's where a lot of the research that I've done has been. So I think that because of my history, and I did, unfortunately, at a young age, have the occurrence where I was on the other side of a criminal and a target for a criminal. And because of that, I think that trajectory of crime was really solidified for me, and there's a huge interest in it. And once you go down that road, as you know, Doug, you can't get away from it.
Exactly. Exactly.
You
Not
made
ever. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, when you were working, you were doing your editing stuff and your journalistic stuff, and then your novel and stuff. Was R.A.Y always kind of nibbling at the periphery? Was this
Yeah.
idea always keeping you up at night and thinking about it all the time? And it kept interfering, sticking its nose in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that she pulled attention until she got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I find that's true with stories, that the characters come forward and they won't leave you alone until you put them on paper. And so the only escape is to actually write it really well, so it's you've done your work with it, and then you can walk away and put it to bed, so to speak, and go on to the next. Yeah, I think she was always there.
I'm going to be really interested to see if there's more R.A.Y books that come out. Somehow I just think that she's so unique that there might be more coming down the pike. So I'll be interested to see that. So tell our listeners, where can they get your book?
They can go to Amazon. I'm with Rough Edges Press, so there's a link there that they can go to Amazon and look it up, and it's right there. Yeah, and it's interesting because it makes it so available for everyone globally.
Yeah.
And I think because in a way, R.A.Y pays homage to the generations right now that are in their teens and early 20s. It really is one of those things where they are cutting an edge for a future we really can't prepare them for. There's no one walking ahead of them saying, hey, you know what? We're able to tell you what it's like to terraform Mars, or, how to politically get through who owns the moon. There's so many different aspects of life, whether it be medical or technical, that they're bravely walking into. So I think that, with them all being at this place where they're looking at cutting edge things, and because it was a homage to that, I think that putting it on Amazon, on a place where everyone can access it globally, is just the right thing for it.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Well, J.L. Hughes, it's been fabulous to have you. We'll have to have you back. You're a great interview. So appreciate your time. And I want to ask all of our listeners to give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this interview, and please subscribe if you want to see more of these interviews coming down the pike. That way you will hear about them as they're posted. And again, it's, great talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a joy to see you both and to talk about R.A.Y and what's coming for the future. I'm super excited, and I really hope that everyone really enjoys it.
I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they will, Jennifer. Thank you very much for being with us. And we'll have you back maybe in the summer when your trilogy comes out. In fact, let's plan on it. And because we'll have another good chat and another fun. Well, that's been it for this episode of Get to Know here on the Outliers YouTube channel. But as you know, we will be back with more interviews and more fun. So keep in touch, keep your eyes peeled, keep your ears open. We'll reach out and we'll go from there. See you soon.